Princess wakes up on the top floor of a tall tower with her hands bound in chains. The girl barely remembers what happened at night, but she is wearing a beautiful wedding dress, and her head hurts badly. Fragments of consciousness show a scene of a night fight, when she fought like possessed with some people, but they turned out to be stronger. The princess examines the room and notices an open window, beyond which an abyss gapes. Realizing that she cannot escape that way, the girl goes to the door, behind which male voices are heard. Footsteps approach, and the princess returns to the bed, lies down, and pretends to be asleep. Two warriors enter the bedroom, one of whom reports that the princess has been prepared for the wedding. But the second admits that he has never been close to the princess and desired at least to touch her, for which he receives a strong blow to the torso. While the second warrior laughs at his friend, the girl wastes no time and, straining with all her strength, twists her hand, freeing it from the shackle, after which she strikes the insolent man with the iron chain, smashing his face. The enraged man throws her to the floor, declaring that she will still marry, whether she wants it or not. But the princess does not intend to obey. She pulls a long hairpin from her hair and drives it into the villain's eye until it reaches the brain. The shocked companion of the deceased forgets the value of the princess and decides to severely punish the dangerous girl. And at first he succeeds. But the princess starts a real fight, forcing the healthy man to retreat under her pressure to the open window, where she throws him out with a kick. But then someone's voices are again heard behind the doors. These are soldiers who, having heard the cries of their comrades, rush to help. The girl grabs a hammer standing by the door and meets the first who entered with a strong blow. Using a brief respite, she removes the second part of the shackles from her hands, lays the soldier on her bed, and, locking the doors, hides the keys far away. She herself sneaks through the corridor, hoping to escape from the castle or at least find out what is happening. Soon it becomes clear to her that the soldiers are searching the castle premises, and the girl hides in the bathroom. Looking out the window, she sees that the courtyard is full of foreign soldiers, and her family, father, mother, and younger sister are kneeling before Lord Julius and his minion Moira. The king is shocked, for he hoped to see the lord as his ally and even intended to give him his daughter as a wife. His father was a diplomat and supported the king in everything, but his son believed that only the strong had the right to rule the kingdom, and therefore decided to seize power. The queen tries to remind Julius of her trust, but he resents her treachery, for they too had promised him the princess as a wife. And when the girl refused, they simply denied him. The sister immediately interjects that he will never get her, which only amuses the tyrant. Unable to stand it, the girl spits in his face. However, the punishment falls on the king's assistant Kai, standing behind the girl. Moira lashes his neck with her terrible whip to show the obstinate girl what can happen if she does not listen to Julius. This time Moira did not kill the servant, but next time for foolish behavior her loved ones would die. Julius expresses his disdain for the weak king, who does not respect their traditions and prefers to be friends with foreigners instead of seizing them by force. However, the king is sure that people are not cattle and will not follow Julius just out of fear. But the Lord insists that today the country will learn what fear is. Julius orders the royal family to be taken to prison. The princess realizes that she is the one to blame for everything. The day before, the girl was supposed to marry Julius, and he would have become the ruler after the king's death. However, at the last moment, right at the altar, the princess changed her mind and fled from the wedding. And now, sitting in the bathroom, she recalls those minutes and suddenly hears a voice at the door. Realizing that someone is about to enter, the girl tries to think of where she can hide in this small room. Into the door enters a huge man in a horned helmet and begins to do his business, not noticing that the princess has hidden under the water in the bath. However, suddenly the man hears how a small bubble of air escapes from the girl's lips and instantly, turning around, tries to see the threat, but instead sees himself in the mirror. Admiring his perfect body, he finally heads for the exit, and the girl instantly surfaces, for she almost drowned in her own bath. Catching her breath, the girl tears off the long hem of the dress, which only hindered her, and goes out into the corridor. From everywhere voices of invaders plundering the castle are heard. The girl rushes through the corridor, trying to figure out how to reach the stairs and go down, and runs into the strong man in the helmet, who had not managed to go far. The fighter grabs the prisoner by the throat and lifts her into the air, mistaking her for an ordinary prisoner who needs to be locked up with the others. The princess hits him on the helmet, which for a second stuns the brute, and he releases her. The princess decides to use a sure technique used against men, but the guy does not pay attention to her efforts. The horned one pulls out a long sword and attacks the girl. However, his size and clumsiness this time play against him. The princess dodges, forcing the fighter to get angry and make mistakes. The man wields the long sword, while the girl almost dances around, achieving that the fighter loses the sword. Left without it, the giant brings his fists into play. Then the princess jumps onto the giant's shoulders, removes his helmet, and knocks the brute out. Holding the helmet in her hands, she suddenly remembers her childhood. Then Lin, the niece of advisor Kai and the great warrior of the East, was just beginning to teach her the wisdom of martial arts. and she began not with physical exercises, but with morality, which allows victory. Once the queen caught them at this occupation, and instead of reproaching Lin for inappropriate lessons for a princess, advised to stay away from the palace so the king would not know about it. And in the present, the princess throws away the helmet and leaves this place. Meanwhile, from the river, they fish out the soldier thrown by the princess from the tower, about which they immediately report to Julius. Moira, examining the body, notices bruises received still in life, so the soldier could not fall himself. Someone definitely helped him in this. Julius suspects that a people's avenger has appeared in the castle, therefore orders to check the safety of the princess. His sergeant assures that she is in chains and locked, so she cannot go anywhere. But the lord insists on it and orders to find the one who resists his troops. He leaves, while the sergeant sends to check the princess the most clumsy of the soldiers, a fat and short-breathed man, by misunderstanding who ended up in the troops. The princess at this time, hiding in one of the rooms, sits down to rest a little. She finally gets rid of the long skirt and sleeves that interfere with her fighting. But then two soldiers enter the room. The princess immediately kills the first with a stick fragment, and the second after a short fight ties with a cord to a beam. Threatening with crossbows, she demands answers to her questions. But the man turns out to be uncooperative and until the last does not believe that the girl knows how to use a weapon. She has to show this in practice, after which the man can no longer tell anything. Armed with his sword, the princess goes further, while the poor fat man climbs from floor to floor. The girl ends up between floors just at the time when many soldiers converge in this place. Realizing that they will definitely notice her now, she climbs out the window and hangs over the abyss, hoping that the soldiers will leave. The sword hinders greatly, and she finally throws it away. But pulling herself up, she sees that exactly on this windowsill rests the fat man sent to check her safety. The princess has to wait until he leaves and almost with her last strength climb into the window. The girl continues her way through the castle, while everywhere maraud the enemy soldiers. She reaches a secret passage hidden by partitions and for some time makes her way unnoticed. Finally, she reaches the throne room, where the invaders celebrate, gathering everything that has at least some value. The fugitive demonstrates wonders of agility, sneaking from object to object, behind which she can at least somehow hide. She knows that the slightest mistake will be fatal, but there is nowhere to retreat. Waiting for the moment when the attention of the soldiers weakens, she rushes through the open space and slips past the soldiers unnoticed. Listening to every sound, she approaches her goal and ends up in her bedroom, where under the feather beds her special sword was hidden. Taking it in her hands, she remembers that day when Lin brought to training her uncle Kai and said that today she would have to fight with two warriors. Kai is not only the king's advisor, he is a great warrior, and it was he who trained Lin. The princess is not given time to realize this fact. Kai rushes into attack, and as soon as the princess begins to fight back, Lin joins the battle. Blades flash at furious speed, and in the end the princess remains unarmed. She immediately remembers Lin's words, in which she urged the girl to fight from the heart, concentrating in herself speed and patience. And seeing that Kai and Lin turned away from her, considering the fight won, she suddenly jumps up and attacks the teachers, forcing them to enter into hand-to-hand combat. Waiting for a brief respite, Kai stops the battle and praises Lin because she was right. The princess has the heart of a true warrior, and therefore he gives her his battle blade, which he can entrust only to a true warrior. In the present, she changes shoes to boots and again hides in the secret passage for servants. Suddenly, she hears the voices of Julius and his assistant Moira, who in the king's bedroom discuss their plans. The lord demands that the wedding be arranged as it should be. Flowers, ribbons, priests, and other nonsense needed to convince the people of the bride's consent. After his new subjects are convinced that everything went according to the law, the old king's throat will be cut, which will rid the kingdom of a weak ruler. Moira wonders why he simply cannot take the throne by force. Why does he need this crazy princess? But Julius reminds that people love traditions, and having received the princess's hand, no one will doubt that the lord is now the lawful king. Moira does not doubt this. Moreover, as it turned out, the couple are bound not only by business relations, which the woman tries to remind. Realizing that the couple is about to start intimacy, the princess calculates the place where they will move and, prying open the gap between the stones, tries to pierce Julius with the sword. But at this moment, there is a knock on the door with the news that the king asks for a meeting, and the plan fails. The dictator leaves without even realizing that he had just almost died. Meanwhile, the heavyweight finally reaches the top floor of the tower and looks into the bedroom. At first glance, everything inside is fine. The princess sleeps under reliable guard. The man goes back, and the princess at this time sneaks into the next room. While in the courtyard, a meeting of Julius and the king takes place, who tries to remind the lord of the legality of his actions and promises that the people will not support him. But the lord reminds that the king himself was the first to break his word when his daughter abandoned the groom at the altar. The princess, climbing into the hall, ends up right between the feet of a huge knight in golden armor. However, He does not move, and the girl decides that these are just armors. However, the giant disproves this conviction by lowering the sword dangerously close to her head. This giant's sword is even bigger than that of the horned warrior, and he swings it, demolishing everything around and not uttering a word. The princess has to parry blow after blow, dodging the deadly weapon. But the golden armor seems impregnable. It is also impossible to pierce the armor. They are too strong. However, the princess still finds weak spots of the battle iron machine in the area of the armpits and groin. The knight receives wounds, but still continues to wield the sword. Meanwhile, the king offers Julius to find an acceptable exit from the situation for both, since treason will not lead to peace. However, the lord does not consider the wedding a treason and orders to take the king away, while the princess just smashes on her opponent a vessel with oil and sets on fire the giant, who roasts inside his golden armor. And at the moment when the fat man, having descended into the courtyard, reports that the princess sleeps in the tower, the remains of the knight fall right in front of Julius. The enraged lord orders to check floor by floor and at any cost catch the killer. He leaves while the sergeant sends people to search. But when Moira tries to give him an order, the man reminds her that she is just the bedding of his commander and immediately pays for it. Moira not just wraps his neck with a whip, but cuts it, since it turns out that her weapon is equipped with steel blades. Seeing this, the soldiers without question rush into the tower. Seeing this, the princess realizes that she needs to hide, but she is noticed by especially agile soldiers who, using their acrobatic talents, quickly surround her. A fight begins, in which the girl kills a couple of soldiers, but she herself also receives wounds. A real hunt for her begins, where a herd of enraged men with swords acts as chasers. And then she rips the necklace from her neck and scatters the beads under their feet. The soldiers fall, breaking legs, hindering each other, and the princess deftly runs right over their bodies, using shields as a path. Meanwhile, the surviving gymnast jumps over the span and lands right in front of the girl. However, she manages to wound him and, tying him to a rope, sends him flying. Nevertheless, it seems that the attackers become more and more. The girl uses all her skill to break through to the exit of the tower, but it is still very far. On the next platform, she is ambushed by two more soldiers, whom the girl kills with the sword. But immediately a brute with a hammer attacks her. The girl has to dodge with all her might so as not to be crushed against the stone. And even when she inflicts him a stab wound, the giant grabs her by the throat and seems about to strangle the girl. She manages to pull out her blade and finish the brute with a blow to the head. However, soon it becomes very hard to defend, because Julius's warriors surround her from all sides, and she receives a serious wound in the side. The girl is saved only by the fact that she was ordered to be captured alive. Driven into a corner, the princess jumps down on one soldier and lands several floors below. A soldier who risked repeating her trick at first laughs at the situation and then receives a wound from her. The girl runs down when past her, not noticing the princess, passes the half-alive fat man. The fugitive is again surrounded, so the girl jumps out the window, hanging on the long royal pennant. And while the soldiers figure out how to get her from there without letting her at the same time crash, she runs along the wall and flies into one of the bedrooms. She hides and bandages her wound, remembering the conversation with her parents. The father persuaded her that Julius is the ideal candidate for the role of her husband and will be able to rule the kingdom in which there was no male heir. The mother tried to protect her daughter, since the girl does not love the Lord. But the father asks them to think not as a woman, but as a politician. And then the princess shows her father her sword and declares that she can take care of the state if she is recognized as a knight. But the king does not even want to hear about it. At the moment when the girl remembers this, Lin enters the room, who tried to find the princess. The Chinese woman has a special ointment for wounds, and she immediately begins treatment, at the same time telling that last night Julius slaughtered the entire royal guard. Only she and a couple more people managed to escape. Lin suggests escaping from the castle through the sewers, but to get into them one can only from the kitchen. Through secret passages the pair reaches the kitchen, where a bunch of soldiers riot. Seeing that the scoundrels have cornered the cook girl, they decide to punish them. One of the soldiers, seeing the princess appear before him, at first mocks her, but a blow with a frying pan quickly convinces him of the seriousness of their intentions. The others rush into battle, but the fighting girls soon deal with all the enemies. But then Moira enters the kitchen. With her whip, she disables Lin and hangs the princess under the ceiling. Lin, coming to her senses, knocks down the princess and, setting a small fire, orders the girl to run away through the sewers while she holds Moira. Having bathed in waste, the princess sneaks into the dungeon where her family is held. She sees that 3 drunkards are responsible for their guard, and amazes by snatching a mug from one of them and gulping alcohol, after which she deals with the soldiers without any problems. Her family, before whose eyes this reprisal takes place, comes to horror and admiration, since the king did not even suspect that his daughter knew how to fight like that. However, when she leads the family out of the dungeon, she still gets caught and receives a blow to the head, after which she loses consciousness. The girl wakes up in the throne room. Lin was also caught and dragged here. Julius stretches his hand to her face and almost remains without a finger. Nevertheless, the invader still intends to marry the princess, and the princess plays along with him, at first smiling, and then promising that he will not know a single calm minute if he still fulfills this intention. The Lord does not like this at all, and he promises to execute her and take the younger sister as his wife. Suddenly, the princess distracts attention to herself by attacking Moira. At this time, Lin grabs Violet and runs out of the hall, and the Tide Princess is thrown out the window. The girl falls into the water from a great height and immediately goes to the bottom. Before her flashes her life, she comes to her senses and, cutting the rope and the shard sticking out from the bottom, floats to the surface. At this time, Julius orders to quickly arrange the wedding ceremony and find his new bride. The same is done by the princess, who returned to the castle through secret corridors, and in one of them she bumps into another enemy. The unarmed girl does not have time to enter the fight because the soldier is knocked out by Violet, dropping on him the knight's armor behind which she was hiding. Then Lin immediately appears, who reminds that, despite her consent or disagreement to marry, Julius is still a monster. The three of them go down into the secret armory, and while the soldiers search the castle, the warrior women dress in leather armor. The princess armed herself with a sword, and Lin with a special bow. Violet will have to hide for now, since she does not know how to use weapons. Meanwhile, the enraged Julius is already ready to torture the queen so that she calls her younger daughter. But then from the street come the sounds of struggle, and the princess begins to destroy the soldiers of Julius. Moira leads to meet the remaining conquerors when Lin joins the fun, using the wonder bow that can transform into swords. At this time, Violet reaches the prisoners and cuts the rope on Kai's hands. And in the courtyard, the pair of warrior women are surrounded by heavy knights. The princess advises Lin to hit in the joints of the armor, and Julius notices movement among the prisoners and catches Violet, not noticing that his armored men lie cut up. He drags the girl to the altar, ordering the priest to begin the rite. The princess and Lin go in different directions when against them comes an archer, but the princess quickly calms him while Lin breaks into the castle and enters the fight with the guards. Uncle Kai comes to her aid, but with the princess once and for all is going to deal Moira with her whip. The princess has a hard time, because Moira is a very skilled warrior, and in the skirmish the girl remains without a sword. And the king at this time tries to disarm Julius, but he knocks the man out, and then against him comes Lin, and the princess uses the weapon of Moira against herself and manages to hang the warrior woman on her own whip, breaking her neck. At the same time, Lin loses her battle and takes a sword blow. Satisfied, Julius puts on the crown while Kai carries away the body of his niece and prepares to fight with the former bride. The girl asks the family to hide and enters the fight. Julius turns out to be a very strong and cunning opponent. At one moment, he imperceptibly thrusts a dagger into her leg. The princess defends with the last of her strength until Julius knocks the sword from her hands. He throws her into the courtyard where the surviving subjects have already gathered and puts the girl on her knees. She pretends that she bowed before the new king, who reminds that he is going to rule using strength and rage and will begin with the execution of the princess so that her severed head frightens the others. The girl, meanwhile, remembers the lessons of Lin about patience and waits for the moment when the king distracts Julius. With a lightning movement, she snatches the sword from the Lord's hand and herself cuts off his head. The king puts the crown on his own head, dedicates his daughter as a knight, and declares that henceforth daughters have the same rights as sons and can rule the kingdom. At this moment, the princess sees the living Lin and rushes to hug her. The miraculous Chinese ointment raised the warrior woman to her feet, and the woman was able to personally congratulate her student. During the general rejoicing out of the gates comes the poor fat man, who finally found the princess.